So I had a debate today with somebody who said that Putin was a rational actor and that, quite frankly, the West, Europe, NATO provoked Putin into invading. Now, this is going around on the right. A lot of people believe this, and I think it's mostly nonsense, okay? The reason Putin invaded Ukraine, and this is what I told the guy, mainly, chiefly, is because he wants to restore the Soviet Empire. And quite frankly, had we not taken the actions that you call provocation, which I think are more defensive, he would have already taken over Ukraine and other countries as well. So NATO, you think this was like triggering him. The reason he didn't want Ukraine to join NATO is because he couldn't do what he's doing right now, which is invade and take it over. So I don't say that's provocation. The only sense you can see it as provocation is he knew he needed to invade before Ukraine joined NATO because he couldn't do it if Ukraine joined NATO, if you understand what I'm saying. The other thing he said was that, well, Putin's acting rational because what if, like, China came to Mexico and started establishing military bases or was militarily backing Mexico or something? And I said, well, here's the problem. NATO is strictly defensive. NATO poses no threat to Russia. Europe's never going to attack Russia. You have to be delusional to think that. This is the sort of case like Putin was making that it's a threat from NATO and Europe to Russia. No, it's not. If China was in Mexico, that's an offensive threat. It was like the Soviet Union in Cuba. That's an offensive threat. So I think that's crazy. And then, he kept saying like Putin is a rational actor and he's not crazy and it's all geopolitics, cause and effect, right? We did something, he got angry, 24, he listed all the things that people that defend Putin do. And I said, so hold on, you think Putin's a rational actor, that he's clear-headed, he knows what he's doing, he's not being unreasonable? He said, yeah, he's not being unreasonable. We would have done the same thing. I said, but you constantly bring up, and he had brought up, fears of World War III and fears of nuclear war. He said, absolutely. I'm terrified of World War III and nuclear war. And I said, but Putin's a rational actor. If Putin's a rational actor, why would you worry about it becoming World War III? Why would you worry about nuclear war? Because I'll tell you something, if World War III does come about or nuclear war does happen, the person who will start it is Vladimir Putin. West isn't going to hit Russia with nukes. America's not going to do it. If nuclear war happens, Putin's going to start it, but you think he's rational. Actually, no, you don't. You know, underneath all the BS you're spewing about Putin being rational, you know he's an evil nut job, or you wouldn't worry about World War III or nuclear weapons. Okay? Now, I say all of that to say I agree with his impulse to end the war this guy was arguing with. He wants the war to be over. He wants the conflict to be over. So do I. The difference is we want the war to be over, and I think this is what Zelensky thinks as well. We want the war to be over permanently. Not just a peace deal that lasts a year or two or till Trump's out of office, but a permanent peace. And that requires, and this is why Zelensky, while he can be annoying, while he can be presumptuous and come across as not grateful or ungrateful, the reason he's so obsessed with these security assurances is because Putin and Russia constantly break their deals. Handshakes to Putin don't mean anything. And one of the reasons he doesn't think a deal with Ukraine is valid is because he doesn't think Ukraine actually is a real country. He thinks it's an artificial creation. So he doesn't think Ukraine's a real country, and that's probably one of the reasons, aside from just being someone, you wouldn't, if you were in a business deal with Putin, you wouldn't trust him at all if you had any common sense. But he also kind of looks at it as like, okay, I'm signing a deal with a ghost, with something that doesn't exist, something that's unreal. Joke's on them. All right, so the obsession with security assurances, this is why Zelensky wants it. And it's not just Zelensky. It's the parliament. It's everybody in the nation. And that's why Ukrainians, all the Ukrainians I know, and when I was in Ukraine, I'm telling you, from what I saw, they don't want to give up an inch of land and they don't want to stop fighting. Okay? Now, when I had some conversations, with people, when they said, listen, we know we're going to have to give some land to get this thing over with, but if we give up land, in return, we need to make sure we are armed to the teeth and Europe and America back us so Putin doesn't do this again. I think we had a good debate, my friend and I, a little bit too understanding of Putin. I think they see him as someone he's not. I think there are a lot of reasons. They're not, I don't want to say they're pro-Russia or pro-Putin, but they do sort of act that way and speak that way. I think a lot of it has to do with the Russian hoax, Russia's evil, Russia's evil, Russia's evil, and they just kind of knee-jerk have a reaction to the left wing. They're essentially saying, if the mainstream media and the woke Democrats were all talking about Russia being evil, maybe Russia's the good guy and Zelensky's the bad guy. That's part of it too. And don't forget Zelensky, the Ukraine phone call, that had something else to do. That also had to do with the Trump impeachment. So there's this problem on the right wing, and it is a problem, that anything the mainstream media supports, they're starting to take the opposite position. Now, I do think that's a relatively good heuristic because the mainstream media is just overloaded with woke progressives. So, it's good to maybe if you see the media supporting something to initially say, maybe I shouldn't support that because they have such a long track record of being dubious scoundrels. And fine, but you also need to go a little deeper and see, because sometimes they're going to support a cause that you agree with, and they're not going to be wrong, okay? And they're not wrong about Ukraine. They're not wrong about what Putin is. They're just not. They were wrong about the Russia hoax. And maybe they are wrong, and I think they are wrong. Like, we'll just support Ukraine forever. We can't do that, okay? But the general binary here of good and evil that the mainstream media is reporting, that Zelensky's good, Putin's evil, that's accurate. Now, they exaggerate and they frame Zelensky as Churchill or something. That's a little crazy. They exaggerate his goodness, but they don't exaggerate Putin's wickedness, okay? So anyways, if you're on the right, you don't want to have knee-jerk reactions to the mainstream media and just immediately take the opposite position, because sometimes they're going to be right about certain things. They are. I know it's hard to believe, but they will be right. They will be morally correct. They're usually wrong. They're usually inverted. They switch good and evil. But it's you cannot simply assume, because the mainstream media has taken a position, that the opposite holds the truth every time. Like I said, I think it's a good heuristic. If you see CNN or MSNBC promoting something, you instantly have to say, okay, maybe the opposite's the truth, but don't. You still have to investigate. You still have to do the work, because they might not be wrong, and they're not wrong about Putin. They're not wrong about Zelensky. They're not wrong about Ukraine in the moral, regarding the morality of the situation. Now, what they want to do, the dynamics and the strategies to end the war, okay, we can disagree there. But again, the overarching moral characterization of the players, they've nailed it, even though they're woke, progressive nutjobs. And you can see, and I'll wrap up with this. If you look at Israel and Palestine, for the most part, they're wrong there. If you take the opposite position of the mainstream media on that, you're probably doing pretty good. So anyways, that's my 2 cents.